Good day. Welcome to the 12th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. Today, I will talk about the role of Egypt in the whole process of Western Asia. I will discuss the following topics: the legacy of Nasser, the Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt, the relationship with the US, the peace accords with Israel, and the view on Palestine. The decolonization of Egypt uh, began with basically the coup, the revolution that Gamal Abdel Nasser had led in 1952. Before 1952, for some 70 years, the British had ruled Egypt, and King Farouk was a figurehead for them. Nasser toppled King Farouk. In 1956, he nationalized the Suez Canal Company, which was owned by France, the UK, and the Kingdom of Egypt. And following the nationalization, Israel, France, and the UK tried to topple Nasser in 1956. That failed. In 1967, a six-day war was waged against Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. And basically, Israel defeated them, and Nasser stepped down after the defeat. What is important is that Nasser was anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, but he was basically secular. And he, like in Kemal Atatürk and Turkey, secularism and Islam in the whole decolonization process were antagonistic forces. So he suppressed the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood was an organization founded in 1928 by a young guy, Hassan al-Banna. And his idea was a pan-Islamic society called the Society of Islam, Muslim Brothers, which was anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, and aimed to build an Islamic state based on social justice, eradication of poverty, anti-corruption, an ethical economic system, political freedom. So they wanted to build this. These groups are being ridiculed in the West, as feudal groups, no idea of modernity. But what they try to do is find another way forward in the Islamic society to build a new Islamic society based on their ethical systems. And Hamas is based on that ideology. And the Freedom and Justice Party in Egypt, with the same name in Turkey, of Erdogan, these are groups based on this ideology. So it's important to understand the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, Egypt was involved in wars with Israel, and eventually those wars ended in a peace accord. I mentioned the 6 Days Wars on the Suez Canal. That was in 1967. In 1973, there was a surprise attack by Egypt and Syria on Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Israel prevailed, and that defeat in Egypt led to the Camp David Accord, where President of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, and Menachem Begin of Israel developed a framework for peace in the region, starting with Egypt. The UN rejected that accord, the United Nations, because the PLO was excluded. And a year later, a formal peace treaty was drawn up between Israel and Egypt, leading to the normalization of relations. And in October, 2 years later, Sadat was assassinated by a military officer who was against this peace plan. Now, the relationship with Israel is tied up with the relationship with the USA. America played a leading role in brokering the deal between Egypt and Israel. And since 1978, the United States has provided Egypt with over 50 billion US dollars in military aid and 30 billion in economic assistance. So the peace accord came with a price tag where, for the security of Israel, the United States paid Egypt. The Egyptian army was basically controlling Egypt, and they were forced in 2012 to hold presidential elections in which Mohamed Morsi of the Freedom and Justice Party in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood, won. And Morsi supported Hamas and a free Palestine. He says the land of Palestine belongs to the Palestinians, not to the Zionists. So in July 2013, a year after he was in power, the West organized, not organized, there were demonstrations against Morsi from secular people supported by the West, and that ended in a military coup led by General Abdul Fattah al-Sisi. USA and Israel prevailed in removing Morsi. He was put on trial and died during the trial of a heart attack. Now, Egypt's relation with Israel is based on support that USA gives to Egypt, basically buying off the Egyptian top military, which then operates as a prison guard in Gaza, where they control the Rafah boarding crosser between Egypt and Gaza. They have security operations with Israel. In prisoners exchange, they are mediators between Hamas and Israel. And the recent plan of Israel to relocate 2.2 million Palestinians from Gaza into Egypt met with vehemently resistance in Egypt, who favors a two-state solution. Egypt is part of the African Union. It is one of the founding members of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, which changed its name in African Union. And the interesting thing is this: in the African Union Charter, there are explicit paragraphs against apartheid and colonialism. And that's the strange thing here. If you look at a map, you will see that Israel is not in Africa. Egypt is in Africa, but Israel is not. And yet, Israel has been pounding on the door of the African Union to get a membership status, an observer status. And the chair of the African Union, Musa Faki Mahamat, made a unilateral decision, he had the power to do that, to grant Israel observer status in July 2021. And he was supported by Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda, and was opposed by Algeria, Nigeria, and South Africa. And the reason behind this is that many African countries are provided by Israel with military hardware, technology, and training. So Israel wanted to increase its influence in Africa. And at the end of the day, the African Union decided to put a freeze on it and reevaluate the whole observer status. An important party in Africa regarding Palestine is South Africa. There are strong relations between Mandela and Arafat, and between the ANC and PLO. Jews within the ANC were openly against Zionism during the apartheid struggle. Joe Slovo was one of the leading members of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the liberation movement, a Jew openly against Zionism. And the apartheid in Israel and apartheid in Palestine have this emotional connection of apartheid in both countries. So there's a strong anti-apartheid movement in South Africa on the issue of apartheid in Israel. And the government is taking a more and more critical attitude, recalling its ambassadors from Israel, Julius Malema, who has now 10% of the votes in South Africa next year, there are elections, he mentioned on October that if he would be in a government, a coalition government, he would argue for sending arms to Hamas and make sure that Hamas has the necessary equipment to fight for its freedom. That was said during a demonstration at the Israeli embassy. Another strong supporter of Palestine was Mohammed Gaddafi. He didn't recognize Israel. He supported Hamas and a one-state solution. He was against the Palestinian Authority, saw them basically as the collaborator of Israeli occupation, and provided financial and military support. So it's no wonder that when Gaddafi was toppled in Libya, they rejoiced in Israel and in the US, obviously the US and the NATO being instrumental in toppling him. Now, if you look now at what I tried to do in the past sessions is to sketch the relationship of forces, make an assessment of it, because I want to explain that there's a regional war growing in Western Asia between Israel, possibly Turkey, that's not clear yet, certainly Iran, Hezbollah, and the axis of resistance, the different resistance group in Yemen, Iraq, and to understand these forces is you need to understand the different actors in it. Because the pre-October conflicts in Western Asia and the attacks by the resistance, by Hamas and other resistance group, that was mainly defensive. But October 7 was the offensive one. The defenses reacted to Israel aggression. Israel was defeated in Lebanon and in Gaza twice. But now there's a real chance of bringing down the Israeli regime and break the apartheid system and have a one-state solution from the river to the sea. And the audacity and the capacity of the Palestinian resistance, together with the internal weakness of the Israeli state, its military, its intelligence, its social fabric, its political instability, all these things are telling you that this confrontation is a different one compared to the previous one. And the key players in terms of states will be Iran, Turkey, and the non-state players, Hamas and Hezbollah. These are the key players. And then there are secondary players, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and the rest of the Arab states, the African Union. And the whole issue now revolves around this question. What is the long-term solution? The two-state solution obviously is dead. So are you going from one ceasefire to another? Or is this the time to gather all the forces and the secondary players who would not take the lead in opposing Israel might cease their support for Israel and the West if it's clear that Israel could be brought down? And obviously the question will be, what will the US and European stand be if a regional war develops? Would they allow Israel to use nuclear weapons? Well, I'm going to discuss these questions in the coming episodes, not in one episode. And the next episode, I finished the assessment of the different forces with an assessment of the role of the USA and Western Europe, how they look at colonialism, how the legacy of the Holocaust impact their strategy, their support for Israel, and especially their position towards a nuclear war in Western Asia. In the book, you could look up the Muslim Brotherhood. I didn't have much attention on Egypt itself as a secondary player, but the book deals a lot with Western Asia. could download the PowerPoint presentation, the PDF of it, at sandohira.com. And if you want to support the channel, subscribe to it, share the channel with friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe, get involved in discussion groups, and if possible, make a donation, and see at sandohira.com how you can do that. Thank you for your attention, and hope to see you tomorrow.